Hey there and welcome back to another video. This is the third video in my series called 3 Levels of Blank, where I give you 3 different ways to play through a standard, and more specifically 3 different levels. So a more simple level, a little harder level, and then a harder level than that. In this one, I'm going to be doing a tune that you all should know or probably already know, and that is Blue Bossa. This is one of those quintessential tunes that you just learn as a jazz musician. I'm sure if you have been playing for a while, you've played this song a million times, but you might not have ever played this song before and you want to know, how do I actually improvise over the song? What do I do? Well, I'm going to give you 3 levels of playing through this song and give you some tips along the way of how I would approach playing it, whether you're at the very beginning stages or you're more advanced. I have a specific PDF worksheet that goes along with this video, which has everything I'm going to dive into written out in concert pitch, B flat, and E flat. It's all in one worksheet, so don't worry if you open it and it doesn't look like your key. Just keep scrolling and you'll find it as I'll show you. The only thing you need to do to get it, and once again, it's completely free, is just go to davepollack.com/3 levels Blue Bossa. That's the number 3 levels, Levels, Blue Bossa, BLUEBOSSA. See, you got a spelling lesson today too. Without any further ado, I'm going to jump inside that PDF now and work through it with you, but I highly recommend you downloading it, printing it out, whatever you want, keeping it on your computer, keeping it on a device or something so you can work through it on your own after this video as well. Here we go. All right, so as you see, we're inside of the PDF. And like I mentioned, it's all different keys in the same worksheet. So the very beginning here is C instruments, but if you scroll down, you'll see E flat instruments, and then further, you'll see B flat instruments. So whatever instrument you play, a lot of you I know are saxophone players, but not all, you have different keys here for that. What I'm going to do is go through the concert pitch sheet just because I like thinking in concert pitch. I think it's important to think in concert pitch, but also I don't know what instrument you're playing. So if I just talked in alto key, just talked in B flat, talk in concert pitch and we'll all be safe. So I have to give my disclaimer up front. In this video, I'm going to be talking about different harmonic ways to play through the song. This does not take the place for good phrasing, for good rhythms, for a great tone, for playing in time, all those non-note musical elements that I preach over and 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 over again. That is the most important thing that you should be focusing on when learning any song, not just a new song and not just this song, but listening to quintessential recordings of the song that you're learning and the style that you're learning. So for example, if you're learning Blue Bossa and you've never really played a Bossa Nova before, maybe listen to a bunch of versions of Blue Bossa, but also listen to a bunch of just Bossa Nova recordings because they're going to give you the elements of that specific style of music. I would say the same thing if you're learning like a slow swing, a fast swing, a rock song, a funk song. You want to listen to that style so you can recall those non-note musical elements, like I mentioned, like phrasing, articulation, all those things, while you're actually playing through this song. So I just have to get that out of there because if you don't have those things in order, it doesn't matter what notes you play. You can just play anything you want. It's going to sound bad if you're playing poor phrasing and your articulation's not there and fitting the style and your rhythms aren't there and you're not playing in time. That stuff is always the most important. I've talked about that in length. That's not what this specific video in this series is about, but just know that non-note musical elements, style, phrasing, all that stuff is the most important. But now I'm going to get into more of the harmonic stuff with this song. So this isn't the first level, but I always like to say it's really important to learn the melody of a song. And I'm not talking about ways to learn a song here, like should you learn it by ear? Should you read it? I've talked about that before. That's not what this is about. So the first thing is you want to really get the melody down under your fingers. Not only so you can just play the song, but because it's a nice roadmap to help you think about the overall tune and think about the phrasing of the song itself and not just thinking about the song as a vehicle only for improvisation, but there is a melody that was written for the song. So what I'm going to do now is play through the melody for you. Check it out. All right, maybe you're able to read this melody and you can play it down, but then you're looking above these measures and you see those chord symbols and some of them might scare you a little bit. Well, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to teach you a very simple way to improvise through the song, and it's going to be level 1, and that's going to be focusing on key centers, okay? Now, without jumping ahead and cheating too much, Can you give me some key centers here? Can you think of some key centers here? I guarantee you what I'm going to show you is simpler than what you're thinking. You have C minor, we got F minor, we got D, we got G with all these hashtags here. Here's what actually works. Now, this isn't a joke, this is real. These are the key centers for this song. There are two major key centers. There's concert E flat major and concert D flat major. That's it. That's right. Over the first 8 bars, you can play concert E flat major. That means over all of this stuff, concert E flat major. And then for the next 4 bars, concert D flat major, right here. And then for the final 4 bars, back to concert E flat major. I'll talk about in a second why they work, but for this song specifically, finding these overarching key centers and these overarching sounds is going to free you up, because what can you focus on then? Well, you're not going to be so focused on chord, the third, the seventh, the sharp. What did he tell me about the tritone? You can just focus on non-note musical elements. You can focus on phrasing, creating some motifs, some rhythms, some articulations that fit, and you're not so hyper-focused on fast-moving chords. You have 8 measures of one sound, 4 measures of another, and then 4 measures of that original sound again. Don't believe me that it works? Take a listen to me playing a couple choruses over Blue Bossa, only using the notes of these key centers. Check this out. All right, so what do you think? It worked, didn't it? I'm not going to get too deep into why it worked here because I don't want to confuse you too much, especially if you're at this level. But basically, the notes C minor and F minor roughly share the same notes. It would be kind of C natural minor and F Dorian are both modes of concert E flat major. Then we have this minor 2-5-1 to C minor, but because of the nature of a minor 2-5 and we have this altered chord, literally the notes of, once again, that C natural minor scale, which is concert E flat major, works all the way throughout. Now, if you don't know that going into the song, don't stress out. I have some other videos about how to identify chord phrases and different key centers and stuff, and I have some really exciting stuff coming for song learning, so definitely stay tuned for that. After that, I have a 2-5-1 in D flat major. I always say if you ever have a major 2-5-1, which is minor chord, up a 4th dominant chord, up a 4th major chord, you can just play the key of the 1, which is D flat major. And then back at the end here, we have our minor 2-5-1 back to C minor again, just like those bars. That's why it works. Those notes work really great, but remember, focus on those motifs, focus on those rhythms, and you will have a great solo and not have to think about too much. All right, now we're on to level 2. And in level 2 for this song, we're going to be going over chord tones. So we just did some key centers, which is more of an overall sound, but now we are going to kind of focus in a little bit and really talk about what are the chord tones of each chord that's happening. As a saxophone player or another wind instrument where we can only play one note at a time, we're going to be playing these either as quarter notes, eighth notes, or like a 5-tuplet, and I'll explain why in a second, because we can't play them all at once like a chord. So the first thing is going to be just write out all the chord tones. Whenever you get a song or this song, write out all the chord tones literally. Don't write, well, I'm going to add this extension, I'm going to do this, because that's all subjective, that's extra stuff, and you can just go down a rabbit hole of you can add any 12 notes to any chord at that point. We're just getting the bass chords. I didn't mention this yet, but if you notice, the first 2 chords I just wrote C minor, F minor. At their literal sense, when you just see C lowercase m, that means C minor triad. Because there's so many variations that people play on this song, the first chord and that second chord, a lot of people play C minor major 7, C minor 6, C minor 7. There's so many options. I just wanted to keep it bare bones and just write the triad. So when we have like a minor 7 flat 5, literal, here's the only time it's really a G altered chord. It's sharp 9, sharp 5. A lot of people play. So I literally wrote the sharp 9, sharp 5. That's why there's 5 different notes there. So when I play through it, you'll see that it's a 5-tuplet. But if you're working on it out of time, just get it under your fingers. Don't worry so much. So the first thing, once you write out the chord tones on a piece of paper or something, what you're going to do is just play through those chord tones in time, if possible. Like I said, if you want to start, just get them under your fingers because you don't know some of those notes or whatever. Out of time, that's fine. But then the goal is to play in time. You can do it really slowly. I'm going to be doing everything at the same tempo, 150 for this video. So here we go. I'm going to play through all the chord tones exactly how it's written in time. Check it out. Okay, now instead of just these overarching key centers, which are good, it's good to know them and not to forget about them when you start moving forward. But now you can hear we're really shifting each individual chord. We're picking specific notes. Sure, some of those notes, like the note C in the first chord, also is in the second chord. But I'm specifically hitting the 1 flat 3 5 here and the 1 flat 3 5 here. So we have that A flat here, so on and so forth. We're hitting specific chord tones as dictated by what's written on the page. So what do you do from here now? Well, what I want you to do now is to play a solo with the backing track once again in time, but you're only going to use chord tones. This could be tricky because you're not going to be using chromaticism unless it's chromatic between chords. You're not going to be adding extra notes. You're not just going to be playing some cool lick that you heard someone play. You're going to literally be playing strict to the chord tones. Now, is this going to be the most musical solo in the world? Probably not, because of the handcuffs that you have on yourself for only playing chord tones and not allowing, more free-flowing stuff. But what it will do is force you to be very strict with yourself in saying, when I'm at this chord, I'm playing these notes, I have to know when it switches. This is also training your brain to follow the roadmap and follow your ears to follow the track and all that stuff. This is not just a playing exercise. If you can follow the track in real time, you can hear the chords in real time, you can play the chord tones and switch in real time, that's going to set us up going forward. So now what I'm going to do is play a couple choruses of Blue Bossa, only playing the chord tones as they're written on the sheet. Check it out. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that solo, and I'm sure you can agree with me that it's probably not the most musical solo ever, but that's okay. We're building, we're building, we're building. If you can play overall key centers along with the melody, you can play chord tones. Now we're moving on to level 3, which is voice leading. So what is voice leading anyway? Well, I like to think of voice leading as a way to create a solo that goes through the changes horizontally. What do I mean by horizontally? Well, it's opposed to vertically. Vertical playing, which is just when you see like D7, you play the notes of D7. And then you go over to, G, you play the notes of G. Then you go to D minor, you play the notes of, kind of like what we did when we just played the chord tones. That's a little vertical. There was some voice leading in there that I did naturally, but because of the nature of just thinking of chord tones, you might have played a little vertically, which is okay as an exercise. Now, voice leading is what's going to get us to play horizontally. Voice leading is what makes solos just work. A lot of times you'll hear people play some stuff and it might sound crazy or they might go out or whatever, but you're like, man, it just navigates through the changes. Well, if you ever sit down and transcribe one of those solos, you'll probably notice that there's going to be some of these elements I'm going to talk about in a second in their solo. They're going to be using some enclosures, some neighbor tones, this, that kind of navigates through the changes versus just jumping from one chord to the other in a herky-jerky kind of way. The way I'm going to start this, and I can't go through every version of voice leading. I have something for you on that in a second. But what I'm going to do is say, pick a chord tone that you want to make your landing tone all the way through. I always like the third. To me, that's the best chord tone of any chord. It gives the quality, major or minor. It's very stable. It's very strong. It's a great chord tone. The first thing I did here is I wrote out the third of every single chord. I'm not going to play this for you because it's just a third of every chord, and I have something else for you in a second. But I recommend writing the specific chord tone out that you're going to land on. Yes, we just went through chord tones, so you already should know this, but specifically get rid of the other ones for now. Think about one chord tone all the way through. Now, what I'm going to show you is one version of a neighbor tone or a leading tone, and that's going to be the chromatic lower neighbor tone, leading to the third of each chord. So what is a lower neighbor? That's just a fancy word for saying a note below the next note. It's its neighbor, it's its buddy. So it's a lower neighbor, which means whatever the target note is, the note that we're leading before it will be underneath of it. Okay? If it was an upper neighbor, we'd be approaching from above, but now we're approaching from below. This is only one way to voice lead. There are a bunch of different ways to voice lead. And this brings me to something else I want to send you to. When you're done with this video, I want you to also go down the description below and click the link, or go to davepollack.com/free masterclass. In that masterclass, it's all about voice leading. It's called The Best Way to Create Melodic Solos. In there, I go through my simple 6-step voice leading process. So instead of just one little step here, I go through 6 steps, and I do it with a bunch of different chord changes, and I show you diatonic, chromatic, different stuff, and I give you sample lines and things like that, and I really dive deep into voice leading. This is just scratching the surface with it, but that masterclass, once again, completely free. Go check it out. A bunch of PDFs with it. It's just a masterclass video edited for you, and what it's going to give you is a new way to think about chord changes, a new way to hear your way through chord changes. And if you like what I've done here so far, you're going to love this masterclass. So check it out, davepollack.com/free masterclass. There's a link to that in the description down below, like I said, but that's going to really have you go the next step. It's not more complicated than this. It's just deeper, and it goes through all the permutations of upper neighbor, lower neighbor, 2 upper, 2 lower, enclosures, all that kind of stuff. And it really spells it out simply, and I write everything out for you and give you exercise to work on it. So definitely go check that out. For this video, however, we're only doing the chromatic lower neighbor. So what I mean by chromatic lower neighbor, I mean this. Whatever the target note is, so let's look at measure 2, for example. The target note here, and we're landing on beat 1, we're going to approach from below chromatically, regardless of the chord below it. I'll explain why I said that in a second. So if the landing note is E flat, no matter what, the note before it in this exercise is going to be D. If the landing note is A flat, the approach note is going to be G. A flat, it's G. Look here in bar 4, we have A flat, right? Cool. Bar 5, we have the note F. So what's a half step below F? Then answer is E natural. You might say, well, E natural doesn't really fit over F minor. We're not worried about how the leading tone fits over the current chord. There is options for that in diatonic leading tones, but for right now, I think the simplest one for you to really get used to voice leading is chromatic, because you don't have to worry about if the note fits the chord or not. You just think, oh, my landing note of a third is B natural, so I'm going to approach it with B flat. My landing note is E flat, I'm going to approach it with D. So it's very simple to approach. All you need to know is what the third of each chord is and know what a half step below that is. In this case, most chords are a measure long, so I did a dotted half note. So the first 3 beats, and then beat 4 is kind of the leading. You can do it as an 8th note. You can do it kind of however you want, but I think this makes the most sense. Down here, the last measure, there's 2 chords in the measure, so instead of dotted half note, I did dotted quarter, 8th on the end of 2, dotted quarter, 8th on the end of 4, leading back to the top. So here's what this exercise, playing this down exactly how it's written, sounds like. Check it out. Pretty interesting, huh? If you've never done this exercise before where you work on chromatic leading tones, whether above or below, you would maybe think that, oh, that's going to sound bad because you're hitting some notes here that don't really work. Look, down the E flat minor measure, The note on beat 4 is B natural. Oh, that doesn't fit over E flat minor 7. That's like the sharp 5 or the flat. Because you're leading into somewhere, you have a strong resolution. You know the resolution will be strong because the resolution is a third of every single chord. Because the beat 4 is leading into beat 1, it will work every single time. And that's the key to voice leading. It's not necessarily every individual note, how it lines up in the literal measure or over the literal chord. It's how it works in context. And that's that bigger picture thinking horizontally, how these notes and these lines lead into one another versus just thinking, oh, does this note work over this chord? AI would tell me that doesn't work. It would say, no, that's wrong. That's not in the chord. Well, a human listening tool will say, oh, that leads really nicely. You don't need a harmonic justification for this, by the way. It's just, it leads in because it's a half step. Half steps are smooth and you're landing on a good note. That's the most important thing to do here. And once again, you want to work on enclosures, upper neighbor, diatonic, two lower, whatever, go check out that free masterclass. It goes much deeper and you're going to be able to play horizontally through solos much quicker than just trying to figure it out on your own or whatever. It's completely free. So if you don't like it, you weren't out any money either. So there you go. After doing this exercise, the final thing really, besides obviously going through more leading tone exercises in the free masterclass, is to just now solo. What you're going to do is start thinking about all these elements together, especially if you've gone through this process and you didn't really skip steps. You learned the melody. You figured out some key centers and used overall key centers. You worked on chord tones every measure. You picked a landing target note in every single measure. You worked on some type of voice leading that leads into it. Now you should be hearing the tune, you hear the melody, you know the roadmap, you know the chord tones, you know some voice leading. Now it's time to just put it all together. Now, between this and the solo I'm about to play for you, there is kind of a big gap there. I do a bunch of stuff in here that's not on here, but this is kind of an example of like, this is where you start and this is where you can get to. And yes, there's going to be some things I do in this solo that aren't on here, but there are going to be some things that I did here that if you went through this process, I'm curious to see if you can hear, like voice leading, chord tones, some of the key center stuff. So here we go with a few choruses over Blue Bossa with no rules, just kind of soloing, but thinking about all of these elements. Check it out. All right, I hope this video has opened your eyes a bit and gives you some ideas on how to practice not only this song of Blue Bossa, but really the process of going through songs in different levels. I think it's really important to not just dive in head first and go to the most complex thing if you're not really ready yet. It's totally fine to say, you know what, I'm gonna think only key centers when I solo. I don't wanna think about voice leading yet. That's cool. I don't wanna even think chord tones yet. That's fine. It really is. The most important thing for you, like I said in the beginning, is going to be those non-note musical elements. Me and probably 99.9999% of people out there would much rather hear someone who doesn't really have a lot of technique, they don't have a lot of harmonic knowledge, but they play in tune, they play in time, they have a good feel, they play some motifs, good phrases. I'd much rather hear that, and we all would much rather hear that, versus someone who might have a lot of chops, they have a lot of harmony, but they're not really locked into what the band is doing, the rhythm section's doing, the track, whatever, and they're just kind of like playing their stuff over top of this track, but it doesn't really jive too well. That's not going to be good. So don't worry about diving to level 1,000,000 right away. Start with level 1. Start with learning the melody. You know, there's a lot of ways to dive into this, but I think taking it slow and steady, especially if you're on the more beginner side of improvisation, that's going to be the way to go. Don't forget to pick up the worksheet that goes along with this so you can have it all written out. One thing I didn't mention on the sheet, by the way, is at the very end, I put a blank chord sheet where it's just the chords with nothing on the staff. So if you wanted to like print that out or write on there, you can write out your own chord tones, or you can copy that a bunch of times, write out whatever you want on there. I just wanted to kind of give it to you so you don't have to like write out the chords yourself if you don't want to, for, you know, above the staff there. So you can have that. Go to davepollack.com/3levels-blue-bossa to get this worksheet, and that's the number 3. If you want to go deeper with voice leading and really take your playing to the next level, check out my free masterclass called The Best Way to Create Melodic Solos. The way to get that is go to davepollack.com/free masterclass. I'll put all the links to this stuff in the description down below to make it easy for you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.